Good morning. Learning Tractate Eruvin, page Yud Zayin 17. The first chapter, still holding in the first chapter. The name of the chapter is Mavishu Gavoya, and we'll start from the top. Okay, still the Gemara objects that this revision only partially rectifies the problem. Good morning. Reisha Rabbi Yehuda, Reisha Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda v'Sefer Rabbanim. The former part of Nachman's statement that one or two individuals are allowed only two Beiseya, confirm to the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, v'Sefer Rabbanim, and the latter part allowing unlimited area to a caravan, conform to the opinion of the rabbis. The Gemara answers yes, in this case, one or two individuals of Nachman is indeed justified in favoring the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, over that of the rabbis. Mishum the Kai Avua B'Shitose, because his own father, Rabbi Yehuda, stands in agreement with his opinion on this point. This is number 3. Notes 3. In the case of one or two individuals, Rabbi Yehuda agrees with the opinion of his son, Rabbi Yossi, that the allowable area is limited to 2 Beis Seah. Therefore, Rabbi Yossi's opinion concerning individuals, since it has the agreement of another Tana, can be favored over the opinion of the sages. However, in regard to a caravan, Rabbi Yehuda differs with his son and agrees with the lenient ruling of the sages that the area may encompass as much space as is required. We therefore follow the lenient ruling of the sages in the case of a caravan. We said yesterday that when it's 3 people, it's considered a caravan. So it comes to individual area enclosed by inferior partition of only horizontal or vertical components, may be no larger than 2 Beis Seah. When it comes to 2 people, also 2 Beis Seah. When it comes to 3 people, they can have an enclosure the size of 6 Beis Seah. That was the opinion of Shmuel. And the opinion of Rav Nachman later on was that 1 and 2 people are they can have an enclosure up to 2 seah, and then and when it comes to 3 people, instead of what we said before, 6 Beis Seah, called Tzokon, they give them enough space for all their needs, no matter how large an area this may be. So the next part, the Gemara says, Amar Rav Gidel Amar Rav. Rav Gidel said in the name of Rav, Shloisha b'chamesh asurin. Sometimes 3 people are forbidden to carry in an area of 5 Beis Seah enclosed by inferior partitions. B'sheva mutorim. But if it's 7 Beis Seah enclosed by inferior partitions, it will be permitted. So 5, it's a problem. Inferior partitions, meaning they are compromised partitions, and Sheva, if it's 7, it will be permissible. At least this is the opinion of Rav. Amur le'am Rav Achi, did Rav really say this? He differentiated between 5 and 7. Amur lehu, Oraisa Nevi'e uchsive d'Amar Rav Achi. By the Torah, the prophets, and scriptures that Rav did say this. So Rav Gidel was 100% sure that this is what Rav said, 5 seah will be prohibited if it's inferior partitions, and 7 will be permissible, even though it's inferior partitions. Amar Rav Ashi, my kasha. What is the difficult with this statement? Perhaps this is what Rav meant, or Rav means. If 3 people required an area of 6 seah for their needs, they need 6, and they surrounded an area of 7, but the enclosure that they made was inferior partitions. Afilu b'sheva mutar, they are permitted to carry in the area of 7 seah, since the enclosed area does not exceed the requirements by 2 seah. The entire expense is permitted to them. But so the previous case was they needed 6, but they built 7. Now what happened if they needed 7 and they needed 5 and they created an enclosure of 7? If 3 people required only, remember 3 people is a caravan, it's considered a caravan already. 3 people required only an area of 5 seah, and they surrounded an area of 7. So they did 2 extra seahs of inferior partitions. Afilu b'chamesh asurin, they are forbidden to carry even in the area of 5 seah, which is required for their needs. Why? Since the enclosed area exceeds their needs by 2 seah, the partitions are invalid and cannot permit carrying at all. So the Gemara says, 1 second, but that which the Baisa teaches, both an individual and a caravan are allowed enough space for all their needs, provided that there is no area of 2 seah vacant. My love ponim modem. Does this not mean vacant of people? There's no person corresponding to the last area of 2 seah. Accordingly, it would emerge that every person is automatically allotted a minimum of 2 seah, even if it requires less, meaning 2 for each person, and that the enclosure is invalid only if an area of 2 seah remain unassigned to anyone even after each person has been allotted 2 seah. An enclosure set up for 3 people may be just under 8 seah, even if their actual requirements are much less. This contradicts Rav's statement that 3 people who require only 5 are forbidden to carry an enclosure of 7. The Gemara says when it said ponui, it doesn't mean me'odom, it rather mean mekalim. Meaning, if we're talking about vacant, it's not vacant of people, rather vacant of utensils. Let's see. Now, lo yiponim mekalim. The Gemara says, the Gemara answers, lo yiponim mekalim. So, what did we say before? We said that we just mentioned the opinion of Rav Ashi, that, or rather, Rav Ashi mentions the opinion of Rav, that in case of 2 extra seah, it will be prohibited to carry inside this inferior enclosure. It will be prohibited to carry. The Gemara asks the question, but 1 second. Individual and a caravan are allowed enough space for all their needs. So, what does it mean there's vacant 2 seah? Provided that there is no area of 2 seah vacant. Does this not mean vacant of people? If the people are there. So the Gemara has to say, no, that when we say vacant, is vacant of utensils, articles. No, the Bible says, the permitted area is not calculated according to the number of people. Rather, it depends solely on their actual requirements, which vary according to the amount of articles that they have with them. One person has more articles, has more utensils, he's going to need more space. Another person has less, he would need less space. If the area they require for their needs is 2 beiseah, less than the enclosure area, the partitions are invalid regardless of the number of people present. And if they don't have vacant 2 beiseah, meaning the two, they have a lot of articles, so therefore the area would be filled up. At least most of it will be utilized, so it'll be okay. The Gemara says, Itma. So really it boils down to whether you're looking at the people or you're looking at what is vacant of people, ponim me'odam or ponim mikelim. The Gemara says, Itma shloishu me'izechad me'em. If there's 3 people, there's a caravan, and one of them died. Shnayim itvaisfa aleim, or there was 2 people, and suddenly another person joined them. What is the law? Ravuna ve'Rabbi Yitzchak. The dispute between Ravuna and Rabbi Yitzchak, what happens when you have 3 and one of them died, or you have 2 and one of them was, and suddenly another person was added to them. One of them, another person joined them. So machlekes between Rav Huna and Rabbi Yitzchak. Chad Omar Shabbos Geremes. The advent of the Shabbos causes the validity or invalidity of the partition. The beginning of Shabbos, if the beginning of Shabbos it was valid, the enclosure was valid, it continues to stay valid. If it's not, in the beginning of Shabbos it was not valid, then it remains invalid. Chad Omar, no, it's nothing to do with the Shabbos. It's not Shabbos Geremes or not, rather Diurin Goyrin, which means the resident caused the validity and invalidity of the partition. So the law fluctuates with the current member of the resident. If they have 3, it's fine. If they have less than 3, it's not. Depends obviously on the size of the enclosure. So that's a dispute between Rav Huna and Rav Yitzchak, whether it's Shabbos Geremes or Diurin Goyrin, the resident or the Shabbos. Now we're not sure which one is which. This time, so the Gemara is trying to figure out which one is which. What is the opinion of Rav Huna? What is the opinion of Yitzchak? This time the Rav Huna the Omar Shabbos Geremes. It makes sense or conclude that Rav Huna that said the Shabbos causes whether validity or invalidity of the enclosure. So this is now Gemara is trying to bring a proof why it makes sense that it's the opinion of Rav Huna. So Irav derech hapeta, if 2 chatzeros, 2 courtyards were joined in an eruv, you created an eruv, put them together via an entrance. So they have now one entrance. V'nistam Pesach. And the entrance became sealed. On Shabbos, the entrance became sealed. Or if the 2 chatzeros are joined via a window of 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, 20 inches by 20 inches, roughly. Or instead of the entrance, the window was sealed. What is the law? May one continue to carry from one chotzer to the other, or you're not allowed to continue carrying from one chotzer to the next, obviously on Shabbos. So Amar Li, and Rav Huna told me, Shabbos or Ilvu Utra, since in the beginning of Shabbos, carrying from one chotzer to the next was permissible, it remains permissible, even though the entrance or the window was sealed. This time. So what do we learn from this? The opinion of Rav Huna is that Shabbos Geremes. What we said before, that the advent, the onset of Shabbos causes the validity or invalidity of the partition. Leima, the right column, it's 1782. Leima Rav Huna v'Rabbi Yitzchak plugta Rabbi Yehuda, the Rabbi Yehuda kameflugei. Shall we say that Rav Huna and Rabbi Yitzchak really are disputing? They have a similar dispute like Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda. What was the machlokes between Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yehuda? Nan chotzer shenifetz hamishter choseo, a chotzer that was breached on two of its sides on Shabbos, and is no longer enclosed in the manner usually necessary to permit carrying them. So it was breached from two sides. Or maybe a house that was breached on two of its sides on Shabbos. And it is no longer enclosed in the manner usually necessary to permit carrying them. Or another case, a moveh. So we mentioned chotzer, we mentioned bayis, a courtyard, a house, and a moveh. That either the lechi or the kor came down. So one of these three was compromised. There's a compromise on all three. All three, all these are permitted for that Shabbos. Vasurin leosid lovei, but are prohibited in the future Shabbos. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yisrael, mutar leosid Shabbos, mutar leosid lovei. If it's good enough for this Shabbos, it's good enough for other Shabboses. And if they are prohibited for other Shabbos, they're also prohibited for this Shabbos. So that was the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yehuda obviously saying, no, if it's good for this Shabbos, it's good. It's good for this Shabbos, but the following Shabbos will not be good until obviously it's corrected. So Lema Ravuna Domar Rabbi Yehuda. So should we say that Ravuna that said that Shabbos is the one to decide the advent of Shabbos, as Shabbos commences, and the enclosure was fine, it remains fine. It's just like the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Lema Ravuna Domar Rabbi Yehuda. Shall we say that Ravuna is the same opinion of Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yitzchak Domar Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yitzchak follows the opinion of Rabbi Yossi that if it's good now, it's good later, and if it's not good now, it's not good on this Shabbos, it's not good previous Shabbos. And there would be similar to the opinion regarding the two chatzeros, that the entrance was sealed or the window was sealed, and he would say that we had one opinion that says that it's not good. One would say that if the opinion of Huna, who says that Shabbos geremes, one said diur and goyim. If you follow the opinion of diur and goyim, and that you follow the courtyard, then right now it's sealed, so you're not allowed to carry. So Amar Ravuna, Anandam Afil Rabbi Yossi, I have said my opinion even in accordance with the view of Rabbi Yossi. Ad kan lo kam Rabbi Yossi also mela disun mechitzas. Thus far, Rabbi Yossi has not said there more than that carrying become forbidden where the necessary partitions are lacking. Here, there are valid partitions. There is no change in the status of the partition. Therefore, even Rabbi Yossi would agree that the law remains unchanged. Rabbi Yitzchak Omar, Ana Damra Afil Rabbi Yehuda. Thus far, Rabbi Yehuda has not said there more than that carrying remains permitted where the necessary residents are there. There's no change in the number of residents that should affect a change in the law. But here there are no residents. The number of residents has declined. It was 3 and then now it's 2. Less than the number required for an enclosed area of this size. This change is so fundamental that even Rabbi Yehuda would agree that the law must change to conform with it. And the sages say either one of the two is acceptable. Partitioning only consist of either horizontal or vertical components. You don't have to have two. Ainun Tanakama, this view is identical to the view of the first anonymous Tana in the Mishnah. The latter group of sages who dispute Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, apparently share the same view of the first group of sages who dispute Rabbi Yehuda. Both hold that a partition of only horizontal or vertical elements is valid and may be relied upon by individuals and by caravans. Why was there a need for the Tana to state both views? Ika benayu yochid be'ishuv. The difference between them is the issue of individual who erected inferior partitions in an inhabited area. The first group of sages permit inferior partitions for individual only if they are erected en route in the course of his travels, but not an inhabited area. You should have a decent partitions. According to the second group of sages, these partitions are valid in all cases, even when erected for individual in an inhabited area. The preceding Mishnah mentions a leniency specific, according to Rabbi Yehuda, to a caravan that camps on the road. Therefore, this Mishnah tangentially lists 4 other instances in which leniencies were made for certain camps. There are 4 things that the rabbis exempted in an army camp. You're allowed to bring wood from any place, an army camp. They're exempt from the obligation of washing hands before eating, umidmai, and from the rabbinic prohibition against eating the mai, mile orev, and making an eruv. I wanted to just read the note to summarize the different opinions of the previous discussion about the inferior partitions and the amount of people, whether it's a caravan or not. So let's read the summary in 24 as a summary. In summary, it was noted in the Gemara above in 16b, the dispute in the Mishnah pertains only to the issue of allowing an area enclosed by inferior partitions to be as large as its occupants require. However, if the area encompasses not more than 2 beiseya, no one disputes that it is permissible to carry within it. Accordingly, the 4 opinions may be summarized as follows. So the only discussion, the only dispute starts only when it's more than 2 seah, more than the space needed. Rabbi Yehuda limits the area to 2 beiseah for individuals and allows a caravan as much space as it needs. Again, as much space as it needs. The first group of sages permit as much space as is needed in all cases, with the sole exceptions of individuals in an inhabited area who are limited to 2 beiseah. So now we're going into a different, differentiating between inhabited area and uninhabited area. Obviously, in an inhabited area, you would not be comfortable with inferior partitions. You want them to be solid. Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, limits individuals to 2 beiseah and a caravan to 6 beiseah. No distinction is made between inhabited or uninhabited. 2 and 6. And the second group of sages permit as much space as is needed in all circumstances with no exceptions. And this is from the Ritva. Okay, so then we go back. So we started the Mishnah. The Mishnah said 4 leniencies were given to soldiers, to army camp. So we said one, they're allowed to bring trees from wherever, wood. I guess for fire, they need to make fire. Allowed to bring wood. Second is ptur merchizas yadayim. They don't have to wash their hands before they eat. They are in war. Umidamai, and from the rabbinic prohibition against eating demai. It says in 26, because many of the common people were lax in tithing their produce, the rabbis decreed that all tithers must be separated from produce bought from a Jew, unless the seller is known to be careful in the performance of these mitzvahs. Such questionable produce is known as demai. Since the obligation to tithe demai is only rabbinic, on a biblical level, one can rely on the fact that the majority of common people do indeed separate the required tithe. The rabbis could relax this requirement in this case that it's an army camp. And from the requirement of making an eruv. The Gemara will discuss what type of an eruv. Okay, so we have 4 things: bringing wood, washing hands, demai, and eruv. Tanu Rabbanon machnetz mechosar shus, an army camp that goes out even to fight a discretionary war. The soldiers are permitted to requisition dry wood. It says in 29, to engage in the theft of dry wood. Even dry wood, which the owners might have specifically set aside for use as fuel, certainly it is permitted for them to take moist wood, which might be abandoned by the owners. They're even allowed to take something that was set aside by the owners. They are permitted to steal this dry wood. The soldiers may also camp in any place, even on private property. And in the place that they are killed, there they are buried. It's like a concept of meis mitzvah. If soldiers, God forbid, died, they bury him right there and then. Now the Gemara will analyze each statement. Why they're allowed to steal dry wood. Requisition, it's a nice word for stealing. So, takanto de Yeshua. This permit to take wood without restriction is the enactment of Yeshua and applies to everyone. The Master has said Yeshua set 10 conditions when he divided Eretz Yisrael among the Jews. So he made 10 conditions. What are the 10 conditions? Or 10 stipulations? Among these conditions is that people may pasture their animals in the wooded areas, even if privately owned, because what grows in such areas is generally not harvested. So in simple words, if you have a 40 acres, 50, you have lots of land, and there are areas where you don't cultivate, that you don't work, you're not using it per se. You're not going to harvest whatever is growing there. You're living it alone. So Yeshua instituted that I'm allowed to bring my animals to that area, and they can pasture there. They can eat the grass there. Another enactment, another condition. And people may gather wood from their fields, from fields owned by others. Why then does the Brisa state that unrestricted gathering of wood as a leniency? So the question over here, if Yeshua already permitted it, why the Mishnah needs to tell me that soldiers are allowed to steal dry wood? So the Gemara answers also Beizme vehigei. There, in the case of Yeshua's enactment, it refers to various types of low bushes. Low bushes you're allowed to take, which are generally not valued by their owners, and therefore you're allowed to take them. The Mishnah is the chidush that it's eitzim, wood, the dry wood specifically, is something that the owners do care about. Here in the Brisa concerning the leniency is extended to an army camp, it refers to even to other woods. Or another difference. There, in the case of Yeshua's enactment, it refers to attached wood, which must first be chopped down, and is thus more likely to be abandoned by the owner because it requires work. Solution here, the Brisa is giving us permission. The Mishnah is telling us you're allowed to take also detached pieces of wood, which are obviously more valuable. Or you can answer the Yeshua's enactment was to permit taking moist wood, which is less desirable because you can't use it for fire right away. But here, the Brisa tells us that even a greater leniency, greater novelty, that you are allowed to take even dry wood. Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema says the soldiers may also camp in any place, even on a private property. And in the place that they are killed, there they are buried. The last ruling is obvious because the dead soldier is an unattended corpse, meis mitzvah. Meis mitzvah, an unattended corpse acquires ownership of his site, the place where he is found, and he may be buried there regardless of who owns the land. So how is a fallen soldier different from any other unattended corpse? That Rabbi Yehuda ben Tema should have to specifically mention his right to be buried. It's a meis mitzvah. If it's a meis mitzvah, you don't have to mention it. We know that meis mitzvah, if someone that is unattended is buried there. So a soldier is also considered, obviously a meis mitzvah is there. So the Gemara says, the ruling that a fallen soldier may be buried on site was needed only to teach that even though the Islay Kovit, meaning we're going to 17b1. The Islay Kovit, he has people who will bury him. He has buriers, heirs to attend to his burial needs. Nevertheless, the fallen soldier still has the right to be buried on site. The Gemara cites a Brisa to show that the designation of an unattended corpse depends on whether or not there are barriers present. The Tanya Ezum is mitzvah. It was taught in a Brisa which that person is an unattended corpse. What is considered meis mitzvah? Kol shen le'kevim, whoever has no one to bury him, heirs to attend to his burial needs. If he would call and others could answer him, meaning if the dying person could summon local heirs to attend to his burial, ain't a meis mitzvah. If before he dies, you can call somebody and ask them something, or ask them to participate in something, is not considered a meis mitzvah. So the Gemara at the end of the previous Amud assumed as given that an unattended corpse may be buried on site. And does an unattended corpse acquire the rights to his site? Vatanya. If one finds a corpse laying on a main road, find him on the road. He moves it to the right shoulder of the main road or to the left shoulder of the main road and buries it there. So he's not really acquiring its space. So they near. If the road is flanked on one side by a fallow field and there's a plowed field on the other side, so he moves the corpse to the fallow field and buries it there. If the road is flanked on one side by a plowed field and a sown field on the other side. Mefaneu lisdeinir, he moves the corpse to the plowed field and buries it there. If both fields were plowed, or both were sown, or both were fallow, mefaneu lechol ruach shirtze. He may move the corpse to whichever side he wishes. We see from this brisa that unattended corpse is moved from the actual site where it is found, unlike the Gemara's assumption above. So, how many fields do we see over here? We have Sdebu is a place that is fallow, meaning nothing was done to this field. Then we have Sdei Nir. Sdei Nir is a plowed field. And then we have Sdei Zera. Sdei Zera is not just plowed, it's also a sown field. There's seeds in the ground. So when you have Nir and Zera, you go for the Nir, for the plowed, because it's less important, less significant. Now, if both fields were plowed and both were seeded, then you choose whatever you want. Either they're both right and left, so it doesn't make a difference. But the plowed is taking precedence over the one that has seeds in it. Amar of Bibi Acha b'meis mutar l'metzaskin. Bibi says, 1 second, we are dealing over here with a corpse found laying across the boundary, across the width of the road between its two boundaries. Since permission has been given to remove it from the boundary, it must anyway be moved from its present position across the width of the road, so that the Kohanim and other travelers who must remain Tahor should not contract Tuma from the grave. One moves it to whichever side he wishes. So since you have a permission to move it from the boundary, you're already allowed to move it to any side you wish. The Gemara now discusses the last another exemption to army camp. They're exempt from the obligation of washing hands. So water before eating bread, there is an exemption to army soldiers or army camp, but not mayim achorim, the water right before the grace after meal, the birkas hamazon. So grace after the water, mayim achorim, the latter washing is obligatory. Why did they say that the latter washing is obligatory? Because there is sodomite salt. This salt is so potent that it blinds the eyes. So therefore, you wash your hands right before, so you wouldn't touch you wash your hands before the tips of your fingers, so you don't touch your eyes. You don't rub your eyes and, God forbid, harm yourself. Abai said, and this damaging salt, melach zdomis, is found only in the concentration of 1 grain in a core of ordinary salt, meaning it's a very small amount. If you will check in a lot of salt, you'll find very little in it. So the core is a measure equal to 30 seah, with the equivalent of 4,320 eggs. 30 seah. Well, so this is 1 grain in a core. What is the law if one measured salt must he also wash his hands, or is the enactment specific to eating a meal? Ravashi answered him, this should not be a question. Someone who handles salt must certainly wash his hands afterwards. With the Mai, and soldiers are also exempt from the Mai. Even though they're not sure if it was tithed or not, they're allowed to eat it. Because we learned that we may feed poor people the Mai. We may feed traveling Jewish soldiers en route to battle the Mai. En route to battle, they're on the way to battle, they're allowed to consume the Mai. He says, no, we should not. Ravuna says that he brings the opinion of Shammai, but you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't give poor people the Mai, and you shouldn't feed traveling soldiers also the Mai. But Beisila says that we may feed poor people the Mai, and traveling soldiers can also eat the Mai. The Gemara now cites the next part of the Mishnah, which states, Umila Orev, and soldiers are also exempt from the requirement of making an Eruv. The sages of the Mishnah did not teach that they are exempt from all types of an Eruv, but only from Eruvei Chatzeros. The Eruv made to permit carrying between one Reshus HaYochid and another Reshus HaYochid. But if it's Eruv Tchumin, to go travel beyond the 2,000 amos limit, soldiers are obligated. 17b2. Tani Rabbi Chia taught that one incurs lashes for traveling beyond the 2,000 amos limit without benefit of an Eruv Tchumin from a biblical standpoint. If he didn't do the Eruv Tchumin, according to Rabbi Chia, is liable to lashes. It is biblically forbidden to trespass the 2,000 amma limit. Since this is a biblical prohibition, the rabbis cannot relax the rules for soldiers. The Rabbi Yonason objected to the Braisa's ruling. Does one receive lashes for violating this prohibition that is expressed in the Torah in the terms of al? See number 10, it says, number 9, it says, the pasuk it goes like this: Al yetzi ish mim koimoy b'yom haShabbos. A person should not b'yom haShvi. So no man should go out of his place on the 7th day from his legally defined place of 2,000 amos in either direction. So Rabbi Chia seems to be based on the view of Rabbi Akiva. Prohibition against living the tchum is scriptural. It's biblical. You can't live the tchum. The sages disagree and assert that it is only a rabbinic decree. Transgression does not entail lashes. But he writes that Rabbi Chia's statement is not accepted as halacha. That's from the Rif. Anyhow, Maskif Rabbi Yonason. Rabbi Yonason objected, does one receive lashes for violating prohibition that is expressed in the Torah in terms of al? It says, do not turn to the oves or to the idonim. It is also that he does not receive lashes for violating this prohibition. Question mark. Obviously, if somebody does turn to this oves and idonim, to this sorcerers, different kinds of sorcery, witchery, black magic, communicate with spirit of dead people and the like. So it also starts with el, al, el oves, el. Maybe you shouldn't receive lashes either. This is certainly not the case, as it is universally accepted that one receives lashes for violating this prohibition, even though the Torah expresses it in terms of al. This is what Rabbi Yonasan found difficulty with. The prohibition against trespassing the tchum, going beyond the 2,000 amas, is a prohibition that was given to warn against incurring the death penalty. Since the same words also warn against carrying on Shabbos, which is a capital offense. And any prohibition that was given to warn against incurring the death penalty does not incur lashes for violating it. Therefore, how could the Brisa state that one incur lashes for trespassing a tchum? So we have a different kinds of system, so to speak. Lav shenitan lazos misas beisdin, and like any prohibition was given to warn against incurring a death penalty, one does not incur lashes for violating it. It says in the 13, azhara is a warning that warns against the death penalty, cannot also warn against incurring lashes. Therefore, if a warning azhara can be violated in a way that would incur the death penalty, there are no lashes administered for its violation, even when it is violated in a way that the death penalty is not incurred. Since the pasuk prohibiting travel beyond the tchum can be violated in a way that incurs the death penalty by carrying, even if it is violated in a lesser way, by traveling beyond the tchum, no lashes are incurred. Okay, let's see. Amar Ravashi miktiv al yotzi. Is it written, do not carry out, referring to the prohibition against the capital offense of carrying? Al yotzi, do not go out, is what is written, referring to the prohibition against the non-capital offense of traveling beyond the tchum. Therefore, the pasuk is not a prohibition that is subject to the warning against incurring the death penalty, and lashes are indeed incurred for the violation, for its violation. Hadron aloch mavoi. We finished, thank God, the first chapter of Mavoi Shugavoya, the chapter of Mavoi, first chapter. But with this, we'll start with the second chapter. Second chapter deals with enclosing wells. In Mishnah times, public wells and water holes were situated in the public domain, an area legally classified as Shus Sorabim or Kamulis, since all the wells and water holes themselves were usually at least 10 tefachim deep and 4 tefachim wide, thus qualified as a Shus HaYochid. Water could not be drawn from them to the surface. It's like a Shus HaYochid to a Shus Sorabim or Kamulis on Shabbos. This caused difficulty for the pilgrims, to those who travel to Yerushalayim and round to Yerushalayim for the festivals, inasmuch as the pilgrims usually camped by the roadside for Shabbos, and it was difficult for them to prepare sufficient water for their animals. Then another concept we're going to discuss in this chapter is Pasei V'Rois, well boards. To alleviate this hardship, the sages relaxed the rabbinic requirement governing partitions and allowed wells and water holes to be enclosed with only minimal partitions. These partitions consisted of amma-wide boards set at the right angles to each other, erected at each of the 4 corners of the area surrounding the well. See diagram to the first Mishnah on this chapter. These minimal partitions enclosing a water source are referred to by the Mishnah as Pasei V'Rois, well boards. Pasei V'Rois, well boards. The L-shaped boards at each corner are known as the Yumdin double post, L-shaped boards. Okay. Even these partitions are not effective if the gap between them is too great. Therefore, if the area to be enclosed around the well is large, additional boards must be added to reduce the opening to the allowable size. These boards are known as pishutin, single post. So we have the yumdin, double post, we have pishutin, single post, and we have pasibirois, in general, the well boards. Individual flat post rather than L-shaped post. Another concept we have in this chapter is Shem Daled Mechitzos, a nominal for walls. These minimal partitions violate two important strictures that normally govern partitions: the requirement that gaps in a wall not exceed the solid parts, that we discussed at length yesterday. Gaps should not exceed the solid parts, and B, the rule that no gap exceed 10 amis. Sages were able to allow such minimal partitions for wells because they suffice to make an area of Shus HaYochid on the biblical level. And this was primarily, this kula, this dispensation, was for pilgrims, for those who travel to Yerushalayim. These two strictures are only rabbinic. The first half of this chapter defines the laws of this enclosure. Then we have another concept, it's called paf, shelo kaf ladira, enclosed area not enclosed for residential purposes. We'll see it at length. And the terms relevant to this chapter are base seya, an area of 50 by 50 amis, boards, the general term for the post, whether single or double post, 2 amma, wide boards, each at least 10 tefachim high, set at right angles to each other. These L-shaped posts are placed at each of the 4 corners of the area to be enclosed around a well. Karpaf, enclosed area outside the town. In a larger sense, any enclosed area not used in conjunction with a residence. Single post, additional straight post inserted between the double post, and well boards, the network of posts enclosing a well. So this is just a introduction to chapter 2. Oisin Pasin is the name of the chapter. So let's start with the Mishnah. Actually, we'll start with the Mishnah tomorrow. See that it's a longer Mishnah. We'll do the Mishnah tomorrow. Bruchim Tiu. So 17b4 we'll start tomorrow, God willing.